Good evening, and thank you for joining me for another Boring Books for Bedtime. I hope tonight's selection provides all the boredom your busy brain needs to quiet down and let you get some sleep. Before we begin, I'd like to give a special shout out of thanks to two new members of our Patreon family, Elizabeth and Corrine. Thank you both so much for becoming supporters of this podcast. By joining Patreon, you help us cover the costs of recording, production, and distribution while keeping this podcast ad-free for everyone, and it's very much appreciated. If you're interested in supporting this podcast and finding out more about the perks available to subscribers, including exclusive episodes heard nowhere else, you'll find a link to Patreon in the show description. You'll also find a link to buymeacoffee.com, where you can support us with a one-time tip, no subscription required. I hope you'll take a moment to check them out. Now, let's read and relax. Find a comfortable spot. Adjust your volume. Take a nice deep breath in. Let it out slowly. And off we go. Tonight we're relaxing with a work I read so long ago, I actually forgot about it. But several listeners have asked for more, and I aim to please. So let's relax with more from Practical Mind Reading by William Walker Atkinson, a course of lessons on thought transference, telepathy, mental currents, mental rapport, etc., containing practical instruction, exercises, directions, etc., capable of being understood, mastered, and demonstrated by any person of average intelligence. First published and sold by the Advanced Thought Publishing Company, 168 North Michigan Avenue, Chicago, Illinois. Let's pick up right where we left off. Lesson 4. Development Exercises. The student should practice privately with the assistance of a few friends before he ventures before a parlor audience, for by so doing he overcomes the first lack of confidence in himself and the awkwardness natural to the beginner along any new line of work. By careful and repeated practice, he gains confidence in himself by reason of his growing success in his experiments, and besides, wears off the rough edges of his actions, etc., so that when he finally appears before an audience, he will feel perfectly self-possessed and at ease, and thus be able to devote his entire attention to his work without annoying self-consciousness and awkwardness. Begin the development exercises by selecting one or more friends who are in sympathy with you and who are interested in the subject. Do not have any unsympathetic or uncongenial persons around when you are practicing, for such people tend to distract your attention from your work and really exert a detrimental effect upon the preliminary work. Select one of your friends as the transmitter and take the part of the receiver yourself. Begin your practice by establishing a psychic harmony or rapport between yourself and your transmitter by means of rhythmic breathing. Although this feature of the work has been overlooked by many investigators of the subject, still it is a very important feature of the work, and one that is conducive to the production of the very best results along these lines of psychic demonstrations. The term rapport is one frequently met with in occult and psychic books. The word is defined by Webster as relation, conformity, correspondence, sympathetic accord. It is used by occultists in the sense of having harmonious vibrations with another. The teachings being that every person has his or her own rate of mental vibration, which, when in harmonious accord with the vibrations of another, induces the most favorable conditions for the production of mental or psychic phenomena. This harmonious vibration does not necessarily mean that the two persons must be attuned to precisely the same key, but that their keynotes must harmonize instead of producing discord. The comparison of the notes of the musical scale will illustrate the principle thoroughly. When two persons are in rapport with each other, there is a mental and psychic harmony between them, which is productive of the best possible mental cooperative work. Hence the necessity of good rapport conditions in mind reading. Rhythmic breathing has been known to occultists of all ages as one of the important adjuncts of psychic phenomena, and its use in bringing about rapport relations is thoroughly understood by all practical occultists. Rhythmic breathing consists in the person breathing in slow, measured, regular rhythm. It may be acquired by counting the indrawn breath, the retained breath, and the outgoing breath by regular beats like the ticking of a large clock. For instance, draw in your breath slowly, counting mentally according to the ticking of an imaginary large clock. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then hold the breath, counting 1, 2. Then breathe out slowly. 1, 2, 3, 4. The rule is that the indrawn breath should have the same number of counts as the outgoing breath, the held breath taking up but 1/2 the counts of either of the others. The above count illustrates this matter. The advanced occultists get their time beat from their pulse beats, but this is not absolutely necessary in this connection. The principal point about rhythmic breathing that we wish to impress upon you now is that the two persons, the transmitter and receiver, should breathe in unison with each other. That is, in perfect time and rhythm. This breathing in unison will soon establish the very best possible rapport conditions between them. From 4 to 7 rhythmic breaths will be sufficient to establish the proper conditions in ordinary cases. In the performance of a test, in case you should feel the power of the transmitter failing, you should stop and ask him to breathe in unison with you for a moment, and then restart your work. By breathing a little loud, the other person will catch your time, so that it is not necessary for you to instruct him in the science or theory of rhythmic breathing. Simply tell him to breathe in unison and keeping time with you. Begin all your practicing with this rapport breathing, and start each demonstration with it also. You will find that it will have a very soothing, calming, quieting effect upon both persons, and will produce in each a mental earnestness and concentration that will help along the demonstration of mind reading. We shall not mention this rhythmic breathing or rapport condition when we proceed to give you the detailed direction for the demonstration, but you must remember that it should be observed in each case. Of course, you will be able to get results without it, but not so easily or so thoroughly and satisfying. It is well to conclude your practice by taking a few deep breaths by yourself and not in unison with the transmitter. This destroys the rapport condition. General directions. The prime requisite for a successful demonstration of mind reading is the acquirement or possession by the transmitter of a clear idea of direction in his mind. The associated requisite is that the transmitter be able to concentrate his will upon the mind of the receiver, impressing upon him the sense of direction so strongly that he will move in accordance with the will of the transmitter. Begin by having the transmitter standing beside you in the center of the room, you being blindfolded. Have him mentally select some one corner of the room, saying nothing to you of his choice. Then let him concentrate his mind upon that one corner, forgetting every other part of the room. Then have the transmitter grasp your left hand with his right hand, you grasping his fingers in your hand and lifting the hand to your forehead. Hold the hand against your forehead just above your eyes. Instruct him then to will that you go to the corner of the room that he has selected, shutting out all other thoughts from his mind and concentrating his entire attention upon the projection of his will. He must not content himself merely forming a mental picture of the selected corner, but must think of the direction of that corner, just as he would in case he were to wish to walk there himself. He must not simply think that corner. He must think there, using the sense of direction. He must will that you shall go there, carrying the words "go there" in his mind. You, the receiver, must place yourself in a perfectly passive and receptive state of mind, resigning your own will for the time being, and being perfectly willing and desirous of being mentally directed or led by the will of the transmitter. He is the active factor and you the passive. It is the strength of his will and the degree of your receptivity that makes the demonstration a success. Keep your eyes closed, even though you be blindfolded, for by so doing you induce a passive state of mind, and even the stray glimpses that you may catch through the handkerchief will serve only to distract you. You must shut out sights, and even thought of sights. Stand quiet a moment or two, awaiting impressions from the mind of the transmitter, who is making the mental command, go there, I say, while at the same time he is willing that you follow his command. After a moment or two of passive and receptive waiting, you will begin to feel an impulse to move forward. Obey this impulse and take the first step, which will often be in an entirely opposite direction from the selected corner. The idea of this first step is to get started. While you are taking the first step or two, you will feel a clearer impulse toward the real selected corner, and will find yourself swinging around to it. Do not grow impatient, for you are but learning to receive the impressions. Advance 1 foot forward, hesitatingly, resting your weight on the ball of the other foot, and you will soon feel yourself being compelled to move in a certain direction, which will end in your moving toward the right corner. You will soon become conscious of being directed by the will of the projector, whose mind is acting upon yours and leading and directing you toward the right place. It is difficult to describe to you the exact feeling that you will experience, but a little practice will soon make it clear to you. Follow the impulse, and you will soon begin to feel the mental command, this way, this way, no, not that way, but this way, until you will reach the desired spot, when you will feel the command, that's right, stop where you are, this is the place. If you start to wander off in the wrong direction, you will begin to feel the correcting impression, this way, I tell you. And if you will but passively receive and follow the mental telegraph message, you will find the impulse growing stronger and stronger until you walk right into the corner selected, when you will feel that you have reached base, as the children say in their games. When you walk in the right direction, you will feel the mental message, right you are. And when you move in the wrong direction, you will feel the mental message saying, no, not that way, this way I say, come along, come. By practice, you will soon become quite sensitive to these guiding thought waves, and will act upon them almost automatically. Practice will soon so sharpen your perceptive faculties that you will often be able to move right off to the desired corner at once, sometimes actually running right to it, dragging the transmitter after you. You will soon begin to notice that there is quite a difference in the power of concentration on the part of different people acting as the transmitter. Some will be able to concentrate so forcibly that they will send you the message clear and sharp, while others will send only a feeble and wavering message. The more concentration the transmitter has, the stronger will be the message. It will be very advisable for you to experiment with a number of persons acting as the transmitter, so that you may become familiar with the different degrees of concentration, personal characteristics of people in transmitting, etc. This will aid you when you begin your parlor performances. When you find a lazy transmitter who is sending only feeble messages, you must remonstrate with him, telling him that he must exercise his willpower more. This plan will often arouse in them a desire to give a good exhibition of their willpower, and they will begin sending you strong mental impulses. It is a good plan, when you have an unsatisfactory projector, to extend his arm out its full length and hold it up about the height of your eyes. In this way he feels the strain, and it arouses his will in order to hold it there, which seems to act in the direction of his sending sharper and clearer messages and impulse. In case the transmitter proves very unsatisfactory, substitute another for him. But as a rule, this unsatisfactoriness arises from the fact that he does not fully understand his duties, does not know what is required of him. A little practice and instruction will bring him out all right. It is often advisable to let the transmitter read this book of instructions if he happens to be a personal friend who is helping you out in your practicing and experiments. The transmitter will find that by looking toward the selected corner, he will be aided in concentrating his attention and directing his willpower. Practice this exercise and experiment in different rooms and with different transmitters until you can go readily to the selected corner. Do not be discouraged, but remember that practice makes perfect, and that, like any other thing, the art must be learned by patient practice and repetition. It is like learning to play the violin, skating, dancing, or anything else. If, after a number of trials, you begin to feel tired, stop practicing and adjourn the experiments until the next day. Do not unduly strain yourself or tire out your mind. When the next day comes, you will be surprised at the added proficiency you have gained. You may vary the above method by holding the transmitter's hand out at arm's length instead of holding it up to your head. Some find one plan more effective, and others prefer the second. The principle is the same in both cases, so adopt either plan or any variation thereof, providing it proves effective. Practice Exercise 1. Finding Locations. After you have grown proficient in locating the corners of rooms, you may have the transmitter select other parts of the room, such as doors, mantels, windows, alcoves, projections, etc. Try a number of these selected locations in turn, gaining a variety of experiences which will prove valuable later on. In all of these experiments, the transmitter must guard you from running into obstacles, furniture, etc., by telling you to avoid them, guiding you past them, and in other proper ways prevent you from bruising yourself or breaking or upsetting things. You must impress this upon his mind, and then you should give yourself into his care with the utmost confidence, giving yourself no further concern about these things, and keeping your mind as passive as possible. Don't allow your mind to be distracted by outside things. Attend to the matter of the experiment in which you are engaged. Practice Exercise 2. Finding Large Objects. The next step should be the selecting and finding of large objects in the room, such as chairs, tables, etc. Proceed as in the previous exercises. Do not neglect this exercise in your desire to do more wonderful things, for you need just this training. You will realize the importance of these exercises after you begin to appear before friends and evening companies, etc., when you will be called upon to find hidden objects, selected articles secreted under tables, on persons, on furniture, etc. If you can find selected chairs, you will be able to more readily find persons seated on chairs. Continue this exercise until you can readily find any and every piece of furniture in a room, and the other large objects in a room as well, when they are thought of by the transmitter. Practice Exercise 3. Finding Small Objects. After mastering the above exercise, have the transmitter select some small articles, such as a book, vase, ornament, etc., on a table, mantelpiece, etc. Proceed as before, varying the objects and places, endeavoring to get as wide a range of experiences as possible along the line of mind reading of this kind. Practice exercise 4, finding hidden articles. After you have mastered the last mentioned exercise, have the transmitter select a small object, such as a watch key, match safe, etc., and secrete it in some part of the room, you remaining out of the room until the article is selected and hidden. Proceed as before until you find the secreted object. Your transmitter should endeavor to give you a great variety in this exercise, in order to properly train you for the public demonstrations before companies, etc. Have him place a key in a book, under a rug, back of a picture, and in similar difficult places. Let him exercise his ingenuity in finding strange places in which to hide the object. In the experiments in finding the hidden objects, he must train himself to give you the mental messages up, down, to the right, to the left, etc., just as he did his old message or impulse, this way, and you must train yourself to receive them. This training will be of the greatest possible benefit to you when you are called upon later to find objects hidden in people's pockets, etc. General remarks on practice. The above exercises will train the student to receive and act upon the mental commands or messages of the transmitter under a great variety of circumstances and conditions. Many of the most successful public mind readers started out in public work with far less careful and thorough training, but there are now still greater degrees of proficiency possible. The student will find in succeeding chapters a number of interesting and startling feats and experiments, which are intended for parlor audiences, etc., but which may be most profitably practiced previously with the aid of a good, friendly transmitter, in order that the performer may familiarize himself with the details of the experiment and thus be more at his ease when he demonstrates it in public. Then other new experiments and feats will suggest themselves from time to time to the intelligent student, which likewise should be practiced previous to a public demonstration. In finding a hidden object, the first thing to do is to get an idea of the direction, then the general location of the hiding place, and so on, from general impressions to detailed ones, until at last the fingers close upon the object itself. The transmitter will be greatly relieved when the object is finally found, and the relaxing of his mental tension may be distinctly felt, and then you will know that your search is at an end. Preparing for public work. Before taking you on with the work before an audience, we must urge upon you to prepare yourself thoroughly by means of the above-mentioned exercises. The great tendency among students is to hurry through to the public work and skipping the exercises as much as possible. This is all wrong. You will never be a thoroughly good demonstrator of anything in life until you master the rudiments, and by practice familiarize yourself thoroughly with the details of the work, and mind reading is no exception. It is true that after a few exercises, you may be able to give a fair demonstration before an audience, but you will never get further than fair without careful practice. And therefore we urge you to have patience and perseverance, and to stick to the exercise until you become a master of mind reading, when you need fear no audience whatsoever, and will be able to give a demonstration that will be a great credit to both yourself and to us, your instructors. And now for your work before an audience, remembering always that the feats and experiments that we shall mention should be practiced by you privately with the aid of a friendly transmitter before you reproduce them in public. In the case of feats in which the audience is a party to the experiment, such as the finding of a scarf pin on a member of the audience, you may practice with a dummy audience, that is, with an imaginary audience consisting of chairs, etc., until you familiarize yourself with the details of the feat. Lesson 5. Simple Demonstrations. In beginning a public demonstration, it will be well for you to give a short preliminary talk to the audience, somewhat along the following lines. Ladies and gentlemen, with your assistance, I shall endeavor to give you a demonstration of practical mind reading, beginning with some simple feats, and then proceeding gradually to more complicated demonstrations. In these demonstrations, I must have your cooperation, for the success of the experiments depends as much upon you as upon myself. In the first place, I must ask that you refrain from conversation, laughter, etc., while I am demonstrating, for these things distract the mind of the transmitter and prevent him from concentrating his mind and will upon mine, and also prevent me from maintaining that passive mental state which is essential to the success of these experiments. I trust that you will help me in this way. I also ask that during the experiments, you will all concentrate your mind and will upon me and help me in my work. In order to obtain the best results, all mind readers prefer that their audiences concentrate their wills upon the work, with the purpose of mentally willing that the demonstrator be successful. In fact, the success of the experiments depend very materially upon the willing exerted by the audience. If you will in my favor, I shall be successful. If you will that I shall fail, I shall feel the effect. Therefore, kindly give me your aid. I ask you to blindfold me and take such other means to prevent unfair methods and practices as your judgment may dictate. I am now ready to proceed with the tests. Choosing the transmitter. Then have the audience select a committee to blindfold you and remain outside of the room with you, while the remainder of the audience select the object that you are to find, etc. When you return to the room, select someone to act as transmitter. If possible, get someone with whom you have previously practiced and established rapport conditions. This will aid you very materially, of course. If this is not possible, select someone of the audience that is in harmony with you and who will have a strong enough will to give you the vibrations. Sometimes women are very good at this work, as they get very much in earnest when interested, and therefore will intently. If your first transmitter is not satisfactory, test another, and so on until you get a good one. You may change transmitters during the evening if you prefer. In fact, this is a good plan if you are an adept, for it shows the audience that there is no collusion. Instructing the transmitter. You should instruct the transmitter along the lines indicated in a previous chapter, i.e., that he must hold the thought of direction, fix his eyes on the chosen spot, and then concentrate his will upon it, and that your success will depend materially upon his ability to concentrate his mind and will upon the task. You should explain to him that you receive your impulses through his thought waves or vibrations, and that the stronger these are, the better you will succeed. Make this plain to him. When the transmitter fails to concentrate his will, you will know it at once, and should call his attention to it, saying, "Concentrate, concentrate now, harder, use your will," or words to that effect. You should impress upon the transmitter that it is the strength of his will that produces the mental vibrations that give you the impressions. Beginning the test. Then take the hand of the transmitter in the manner already described in the previous lesson, placing it to your forehead, or else holding it up high in front of you. Then begin a wavering motion or direction, preferably describing a circle slowly. In this meaningless wavering motion, remain perfectly passive, awaiting impressions. Soon you will begin to feel a mental resistance to certain directions, and a mental willingness that you move in another direction. Then move along the line of the least mental resistance. In some cases, you will receive a strong mental urge, pull or push, in the direction of the selected spot. Here is where your practice comes in, for in your practice experiments, you have acquired the art of recognizing these impressions as they come to you in their different forms, and so are prepared to yield to them and move accordingly. It is impossible to describe in writing just how these impressions come and feel like, for actual experience is necessary before you will know just what is meant. But once you have accustomed yourself to receive and recognize the impressions, the rest is all a matter of practice and development. And now for the demonstrations themselves. You should begin with the simplest feats, and then work up gradually to the more complicated and difficult ones. This plan will build up your own powers, and will develop the transmitters. We herewith give a number of interesting feats and demonstrations, explaining the details of each. Of course, the general directions we have given regarding the receiving of impressions, etc., will apply to all of these feats, for the principle underlying them all is the same precisely. Finding a location. Begin by having the audience select a part in the room which may be easily reached by you, then proceed as directed until you feel that you have reached the right place or location. Finding a person. Have the audience select a person, one of their number. Find the general location of the person. Then, standing still, reach out your right hand and begin feeling about. You will find that as your hand moves away from the right person, you will feel a drawing back impression, whereas when you reach toward the person, you will receive an urging forward impression. A little practice will soon enable you to distinguish these mental impressions. Then place your hand on the person who seems to be the center of the impressions. If this is the wrong person, you will receive a mental impression of wrong, in which case you must start up the moving your hand to and fro and around until you feel the urge impression, when you should place your hand on the person immediately in front of you. When you reach the right person, you will receive an unmistakable impression and mental message of all right, followed by a lessening of the will tension, and you will know that you have succeeded. You should practice this in private before attempting public demonstration. Finding a small object. Have the audience select some small object in plain sight in the room. Then find it in the manner described of above in the case of the selected person. The rule is identically the same. But there are some other details to be observed in the matter of up or down, for the object may be higher than your shoulder or lower, in which case you will have to either reach up or down. In this reaching up or down, follow the same general rule as given. When you reach the right location, you will feel an impression of not yet finished from the mind of the transmitter. Then reach up slowly. If this is right, you will receive a corresponding impression and may go on to center the object. But if it is not right, you will receive a mental urge downward, which you should follow. The rule always is to follow the line of the least mental resistance. You will always receive the resistance when you are not succeeding, and will always receive the lack of resistance when you are succeeding. Learn to focus these impressions until they center positively and constantly on the same spot. Then you have succeeded, for there will be your object right under your hand. Finding a book. Have the audience select a book on the shelves of a bookcase, and then find it in the manner just related. The two feats are precisely the same, although the latter will appear more startling to the observer. The floral tribute. This test is known as the floral tribute. It is performed by having a bouquet of flowers on the table. Then select some young man in the audience and let him pick out some young woman in the audience whom he wishes to have the flowers. You must retire from the room, of course, while he selects the young lady and mentions her name and position to the audience. Then returning to the room, pick up the bouquet and taking the hand of your transmitter, find the young lady and present her with the flowers. Of course, this feat is merely a fancy rendition of the simple feat of finding the person thought of, and is performed in the same way. Study the directions for that demonstration and apply them in the present case with appropriate variations. The reunited couple. This test is known as the reunited couple. It is performed by having the audience select two persons, a young man and a young woman, and stand them up in front of the room like a couple about to be married. Then they should have a third person, a man, selected and stood before them as the parson who will tie the knot. The three persons should then take their seats, and when you enter the room and take the hand of your transmitter, you must first find the parson, then the groom, and then the bride, and arrange them in their proper positions. This is a highly effective test, and invariably brings hearty applause, and the hunt affords much merriment to the audience. But as you will readily see, it is but a variation of the demonstration of finding a person. The hidden jewelry. Have the audience select some small article, like a scarf pin, ring, etc., and hide it on the person of someone of the audience. Then you are to find it. This demonstration combines the features of Demonstration 2 and Demonstration 3. That is, you have first to find the person as described in Demonstration 2, and then the object, which is practically a variation of Demonstration 3. Study the details of Demonstration 3 and practice the present demonstration in private before trying it in public. The discovered course. Have a member of the audience walk around the room, following a prescribed course selected by the audience. Have your transmitter memorize the course accurately, and then you must walk over the same course when you return to the room. This is effective, but is merely a variation of the finding the corner demonstration. Replacing the pin. This is called replacing the pin, and is very effective when properly performed. Have a member of the audience take a pin and insert it in the wall in a spot plainly visible to the audience, not too high up, however. About on the level of your shoulder is best. Then have him withdraw the pin and hide it somewhere in the room. Then, when you return to the room and take the transmitter's hand, you should first find the pin in the manner heretofore described, and then find the place where it had been stuck. Then, circling your hand around in narrowing circles until you feel the proper impression, push the pin home in the spot in which it formerly was driven. This final effort is really merely a modification of finding the spot, and with a little practice may be easily performed. The theft detected. This feat is called the theft. Have one of the audience play the thief and steal an article of jewelry or similar small object from a second person called the victim. Then the thief should hide his spoil in a safe place about the room. Returning, you first find the thief, then the hidden article, then the person according to the methods already given. This is a very effective feat, but is merely a combination of finding the person and finding the object. The reconstructed tableau. This feat is known as the reconstructed tableau. It is performed by having several of the audience form a simple tableau group and then retire to their seats. Returning to the room, you are to find each person, lead him or her to the former spot, then reconstruct the group. This is somewhat difficult, but not nearly so much as you might suppose. A little private practice will enable you to perform it with ease. The murderer and the detective. This test is known as the murder and the detective, and is very spectacular and sensational, and is accordingly one that is in great favor with the public performers. It is performed as follows. The audience selects one man to act as the murderer, another to act as the victim, and also some object to act as the dagger. And lastly, a place in which the body is to be concealed. Then the murderer picks up the dagger and kills his victim, afterward concealing the body in some part of the room, usually sitting in a chair, and the dagger in another place. Then, when you return to the room, you first find the body, then the wound, then the dagger, and then the murderer. This is usually announced as a wonderful piece of telepathic detective work and is extremely effective, and may be reserved as the principal effect of your series of demonstrations. You will notice that the feat is merely an elaborate combination of the simpler feats of finding the person, finding the object, etc. The returned hats. Have the hats of a number of men in the audience placed on a table or other place, and then returning to the room, blindfolded of course, you pick up the hats one by one and place them upon the heads of their proper owners, who are seated in different parts of the room. This is a simple feat, although very effective. It is, of course, merely a variation of the feat of finding the person. There is one point, however, that must be remembered in this feat, and that is that the transmitter should know just whose hat is held in your hand, just who the owner of that particular hat is, and where he is sitting or standing. Otherwise, he cannot send you the mental impulses which will enable you to find the owner. It will be well for the transmitter to hold the hat so that it can be seen by the audience, requesting the owner to rise in his seat so as to indicate his whereabouts, your back being turned to the audience while this is being done, in order to avoid suspicion of your peeping, etc. The Lady and the Ring. This feat is performed by having a lady in the audience loan the transmitter her ring. When you return to the room, you find the lady and replace the ring upon the finger from which she took it. The transmitter must remember the lady and the particular finger, of course. The rest is simply a combination of the finding the person and finding the spot feats. It is very effective if neatly performed. General advice. We have given you a great variety of demonstrations or feats, but you must not attempt to produce all of them at an evening's entertainment. It will take some time to perform a few of them effectively and impressively, and you should avoid any attempt to hurry through the feats. Nor should you spoil your good impression by cheapening the demonstrations in the direction of performing too many at one sitting. Neither should you tire or fatigue yourself by too many feats. When your mind or body are tired, you do yourself an injury to perform these demonstrations, and besides, you cannot obtain the best results while fatigued. You should rest a little while after each feat before attempting another one. When the entertainment or exercises are over, you should take a few strong, deep breaths, swing your arm around a little to promote the circulation and relieve the nervous tension. You may feel a little dazed at first after performing a few feats, but will soon learn to throw off the passive condition and engage in the laughing conversation that will follow the entertainment. Do not take yourself too seriously, and remember that laughter and a little boyish or girlish spirits is a wonderful tonic. Do not become impatient if you do not progress as rapidly as you would desire. you are practically developing a sixth sense and are like a baby learning to walk. It takes time, but practice will surely bring you success. Take things calmly. The feats that will be possible for you to perform, even from the start, will be wonderful enough without any necessity for your complaining about your slowness in learning to perform the more complicated ones. And with that good advice, I think we'll end this evening's reading from Practical Mind Reading by William Walker Atkinson. That was certainly interesting. If you'd like to read this work for yourself, as always, you'll find a link to a free ebook from Project Gutenberg in the show description. If you'd like to connect, suggest a boring book you'd like to hear read, or, like this evening's episode, request more from a book we've already started, the best place to catch me is on Twitter at BoringBooksPod, or drop me an email via our website, www.boringbookspod.com. Thank you so much for joining me for this evening's reading. Until our next boring book, good night.